last few years. I wanted to be a little conservative and say, okay, for the first 5 years of Howard's projections, let's take 85% of that cash and assume that we can at least hit that mark. If we can't hit that mark, we can always, at least in the first 4 years, renew that at a fairly lower rate.
Here's the Shell Energy.
Has arrived.
So the goal would be to use 85% of that projected cash flow, peg the borrowings to mature as that cash is available, and then after 5 years, knowing that we'll have some more experience operating this, to let's go ahead and use 100% of his estimated cash flow. If we actually do hit his numbers or do better than his numbers,
and I'd like to just interrupt a second,
okay,
and say these are not our original projections.
Correct.
How would you characterize the projections that Howard is using for these cash flows, Michael?
They're staff's assumptions rather than Howard's, so they're very conservative. They reflect the more conservative kilowatt hours that we've discussed in the past.
Sorry.
Has arrived.
So just thinking through that, if we don't make Howard's projections, we can always roll that debt over on a short-term basis until we have better projections. If we have excess cash, we can always put it in the RUS as what's called cushion of credit account, and earn 5.5% on that until the next debt payment is due. So it's a balancing act, and we wanted to be conservative so that we wouldn't get hung out 4 or 5 years down the road having to re-borrow at higher rates. So if you want to go back to the left of the spreadsheet. So this is an estimate of rounded numbers of cash that we think might be available in the following years. We can borrow for pretty much any term. So because the yield curve is steepest in years 1 through 8, and the borrowing costs are almost de minimis the first year, 16 basis points plus our 8. I paid back as much as we could yearly for 8 years, and then 2-year increments beyond that as the rates flatten out. So if you scroll down just a little bit more, keep going. So the blended short-term rate under this scenario, we borrow $11.4 million at about 2.2%. The 35-year would be the balance of that $19 million, so 7.6 million at the current long-term rate of 3.35%, for a total weighted average of 2.65%. Now, as the early debt rolls off, that weighted average will increase over time. So Howard's projections were from 2.5% to 3.5%. We took the cash flows based on 2.75% and estimated that. It's all going to be a moving target. So given that scenario, keep going, let's scroll down to the next half of this. The draw schedules would be, the strategy would be to have Michael borrow the longest term money first, so that if rates rise, the long term doesn't get away from us. The low rates, if rates rise, will increase substantially, but not nearly as impactfully to the portfolio. So we'll borrow the 35-year money first in as many tranches as Michael feels necessary, and then after that 7.6 million is borrowed, we borrow in tranches of 20 years, 18, 16, and so forth until the remaining $19 million, remainder of that money is exhausted. So I want to scroll down just another line or two, and that's the plan. And what I think we ought to do is give Michael the authority to borrow on that debt's ladder schedule with whatever guidance he needs from the Finance Committee.
I'd just like to say that we asked Alan to do it at our Monday Finance Committee meeting, and he circulated by email. We haven't had an opportunity to really discuss it at the Finance Committee, meaning the results, but there was some email traffic in compliance with the Brown Act, and I think it's a very sensible analysis. I agree with it 100%, and I think if I understand it correctly, what it'll result in is if we borrow the full $8 million supplemental loan, $58 million total, about 20% of that, a little less than 20% of that, 11.5% will be, medium-term debt, pretty long-term debt, but not the full 35-year debt, and the other 80% will be the long-term debt, and the total weighted average cost of capital, including the actual draws made to date, would be about 2.98% or 3% for, roughly 30-year money. So I can't find anything wrong with Alan's analysis and would support it unless somebody else has a different opinion.
No, I went through it also and asked Alan to look at one other alternative, which convinced me this is the right plan. And in our planning for all of this, Howard did 2 case studies. One is assuming total average cost of capital 3%, and the other 3.5%. So we're ending up at about the 3% in doing that. So with that part's, we're at the low end of the projections that we were working with a high probability that we can meet that over the course of the next 5 months as we draw down. And it would all be locked in by September. So we would have a totally known cost of capital.
So that'll open up to any questions from the board or comments?
No, just thank you.
Any questions, comments from the audience?
So staff would like board approval to go ahead and make, to draw up these loan draws, and then once they're drawn up, we can send them into Russ and basically hold there until we feel that we need the cash and the interest rates are right. And then we would confirm that drawdown with either President O'Grady or Bob Epstein to actually take those draws and institute the loans.
I'd like to make a motion that we provide Michael with the authority to take action on this drawdown schedule.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So with that, do you want to, since the Shell folks are on the line, do you want to skip over 8C and come back to it, or do you want to handle 8C first?
No, 8C should go fairly rapidly, so we'll go ahead and do it if that's all right.
Please proceed.
So in the overhead pole design, our Thomas & Betts is our overhead pole provider and designer, and Dave Rightly is here to assist with this agenda item. We have in their design, they made a mistake. The overhead construction contract was bid including ground line reactions provided by Thomas & Betts. The reactions were based on T&B calculations. After the construction contract was awarded to Wilson for the overhead, rigorous review of these calculations were completed by Exponential and PG&E, and it determined that the Thomas & Betts calculations for 2 of the structures failed to account for the worst case condition, that being a specific wire being broken. Subsequently, T&B submitted revised calculations which increased the ground line reactions for these 2 poles. So instead of needing 3 micropiles for these 2 poles, we'll actually need 4 micropiles for these 2 poles. This has resulted in a change order from Wilson, who's actually installing the micropiles, which is the subject of 8C, which is a $42,000 change order for Wilson to construct these beefed up foundations. We will be working with Thomas & Betts, who actually made the mistake, to go back on Thomas & Betts and say, basically you made the mistake and that they should be responsible for the repair. And Dave, I don't know if I added or if there's anything you need to add to that discussion.
I think you covered it perfectly.
So so staff recommends the approval of the change order with direction to staff and to the Al Valley team to pursue Thomas & Betts for remuneration of these funds because they originally made the mistake.
So these are not the same 2 pole problems that we were talking about earlier with the possible moving them uphill. It's a little different deal.
No,
No.
you're correct. It is not the same 2. It is a different deal.
Different polls.
Done, Dave.
Has arrived.
Any other comments, questions from the board or the audience? So I'll make a motion to approve this change order.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the direction to staff.
Good.
So we're at 8D.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Dave.
Michelle,
Thank you all.
is Dave sticking around for
Yeah, Dave will stick around for the
power quality?
Standish, do you want to move to the power purchase and then come back to power quality?
Right, so that's 8E, F, and G.
David, we're going to move to power purchase because we have quite a few people on the line for that, and then come back to power quality. Is that all right with you?
Fine with me.
So 8E is continued discussion of possible action regarding the district's efforts to secure necessary power procurement, scheduling, and settlement services and regulatory affairs coordination in anticipation of connecting to the national power grid. Michael will lead this with participation from Shell Energy and Broad Legal. 8E, I think, is an introduction and the background, and then 8F and 8G are specific resolutions. And I would like to note that the Planning Committee has considered this in detail, so we'll look for your recommendation after Michael and the Shell team, Broad Legal, do their thing.
So for introductions, we have Don Dame on the line, who's our power purchase consultant. We should have Scott Blazing from Braun Legal, possibly Kevin Smith from Braun Legal, and then I heard Robert Pierce and possibly Carrie Sillian, sorry for butchering your last name, from Shell Power. Is everyone there?
Yeah, Don James here, yep. Robert Pierce with Shell Energy.
So,
Blazing here from Public.
great, thank you, gentlemen, for attending. So once the Out Valley power line is complete, we will need to purchase power. And we have made good progress on this. I think this has been a goal of the district to try to get this solidified before the end of the fiscal year. And our first objective was to solidify our relationship with CalISO. We have, the board approved 2 agreements with CalISO at their last meeting, and I'm pleased to report that both of those agreements have been fully executed and are ready to be in place. Those are the small utility operating agreement and the meter agreement. So those have been approved, and we've had nothing but cooperation from CalISO, so that's great. Before the board today are 2 agreements. One is the schedule coordinating services agreement. This is basically a services agreement where Shell will provide services for a certain cost per month, which is $5,500. The schedule coordinating services agreement sets forth the rates, terms, and conditions which Shell agrees to perform schedule coordinating. They actually schedule our power needs with CalISO and then true up those needs in the real-time market. The schedule coordinator submits schedules based on the district's forecast and hedging strategies to CalISO for the day-ahead market and the hour-ahead market on the weekends. CalISO sends Shell an invoice daily for the various true-up periods, and then Shell pays these invoices daily. Shell accumulates the charges and invoices the district by the 10th of each month, and we pay them by the 20th of each month. Subsequent true-ups will be invoiced by Shell until they receive a final confirmation. The master power purchase and sale agreement is based on a standard Edison Electric Institute agreement that's used throughout the industry with a cover sheet that actually provides some changes to the document. This sets forth the mechanism in which to purchase power from Shell. Later, the board will enter into a confirmation agreement. So you have the scheduling coordinating agreement, which is actually a services agreement where it provides for Shell to work with CalISO to schedule our power needs and procurement. And then the procurement is handled through the master power purchase agreement. The confirmation agreement, which will be later, that this is not on the table today, but this is the final piece of the pie. This agreement is used for the actual purchase of power. This agreement specifically deals with the trade, including the delivery point, the volume, the pricing, and the term, which is initially set for 3 years. This would establish our hedging strategy, whether we buy 50% of our low season costs in advance or 80% of our high season. That whole entire hedging strategy is covered in the confirmation agreement. Whether we have any hedging strategy for the first couple of months of this, while the completion date of the Out Valley project is known, that's a question. But once again, that hedging strategy is contained in the confirmation agreement. It's not contained in the agreements that we're looking at today. So the way that the way that this the purchase is 3 different factors. We have a hedging strategy, which is purchased in advance, and then the day ahead. And so we have to do a 7-day rolling forecast of our anticipated power needs. And then Shell gives that to ISO, and we actually buy into the day-ahead market based on our forecast. And then that is trued up in the real-time market on the day of. So I've had staff practicing a forecast model, which you might want to show, which shows Brandy's actually been forecasting our needs on a weekly basis to actually show what our so there it is. So the blue line is Brandy's forecast and the red line is the actual. So we would be turning in the red line, and the difference between our actual and our we would be purchasing the red line. The difference between the two would be the true up and the real-time market. And all of these 3 things are the differences between these on a market basis are relatively small, but it's important to be as close as possible to get the best rate.
And those are 4-hour increment?
For an hour.
So Don Dame is here, and if there's any other question, but staff on the overall recommends approval of these 2 proposals through resolution as stated. And Don, did you have some comments about the hedging strategy and the overall direction?
No, I don't send any questions, Michael. I think you covered it quite effectively. The one just a little kind of sidebar I would add is that virtually all load-serving entities in California, large or small, go through these same routines and business functions on a daily basis. The forecasting, adding in any pre-purchased arrangements they've made, and then buying the residual from the day-ahead market and then truing up in the real-time market. So what the district is embarking on is indeed the regular and routine scheduling and settlement activities undertaken by all load-serving entities in the state.
Okay, Bob?
So I have a couple of questions. So we've covered the actual power. Can we talk a little bit about the renewable energy requirements, how that fits in, and also is the seller accountable for the greenhouse gas permits or allowances? So if you could cover those 2 points.
Is that directed to me? Or do you
It's
want
directed to
handle
Shell, I
that?
assume. You'd be the one handling it, right? Robert, would that be you? Sorry. Whoever wants to answer it is fine.
This is Scott Blazing for Brown Legal. With respect to the renewables matter under the California's Renewable Portfolio Standard, it's my understanding that Kirkwood Meadows has an exemption, if you will, that's carried forward from the time that they were an investor-owned utility, such that they can satisfy their obligation to purchase renewable power by purchasing what are called bucket 3 renewable energy credits, and so those can be purchased on the market. There isn't an obligation, as I understand it, for Kirkwood Meadows to actually purchase renewable energy, but rather just simply the unbundled credits. Now, you can certainly choose as part of your power purchase strategy to purchase bundled renewable energy, but you have the right as well to simply procure the credits themselves. I'm not sure how much of the strategy you've gone into them.
But the right existed because we were an island unconnected to the grid, so doesn't that change?
No, actually, we've been told that it will not change once we get connected to the grid, that we will still be able to
Correct.
buy into the Tier 3. And that's exactly what we have done.
Yeah,
We
I know.
actually fulfilled our requirement through 2016, I believe.
Okay, so we can continue that indefinitely? We have a lifetime exemption for reasons which we don't have to understand.
We know that we're exempt through 2016 and have actually purchased our renewables.
Okay, then maybe go to my second question. Do we, the greenhouse gas allowances required for the power? The seller covers that, not us. Is that correct?
We are in auction. We have
Well,
allocation.
we get our allocations, but the power itself, the supplier covers that. Is that correct?
That would be-
It's my understanding, I could touch on this perhaps, this is Scott Blazing again, is that the power associated with that is embedded with, or excuse me, the cost associated with that is embedded within the wholesale power that you'll be purchasing. So
Right.
implicitly, you are paying for those greenhouse gas costs through your purchase power price.
Right, but the generator is the one who actually buys the allowances.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it planning?
This is Robert Pierce with Shell Energy. I just
Yeah.
wanted to confirm Scott's comments. On the renewable energy, Shell does provide to other customers the bucket 3 RECs, the renewable energy credits. However, it's our understanding in our discussions with the district that they, as Michael mentioned, has been doing that along the way with other parties, and that's fine with us. We can provide the product at a later date. And regarding the greenhouse gas, that Scott's correct that the greenhouse gas costs are implicit with the price of the energy.
So your outlook for bucket 3 credits, I mean, I would currently describe them as pretty cheap. Do you see that trend continuing?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the compliance for the utilities is set forth in the couple of compliance periods. We're currently in compliance period 2,
Right.
which is 2014 through 2016. So most of the utilities, especially the IOUs, are kind of flush with renewable energy, until the later years, maybe 2019 and 20. So, yeah, RECs, standalone RECs are relatively inexpensive, and I think that for the foreseeable future that will continue.
So the reason why I bring this up, I didn't realize that it wasn't being handled through Shell, but it might be in the future, is if currently our customers are getting the minimum renewable energy required by law, any less than we'd be illegal. Okay. So we could offer either individual customers or just decide to be 100% renewable, and that may have a positive advantage either to the customers or to the resort, and it might be pretty nominal cost. And so we may want to at least publish on our website what our renewables percentage is and consider whether there's interest in people going to a higher number voluntarily or going to 100%, because I think the cost would be well less than the costs we discussed earlier in this meeting.
Sure.
Just, the only comment I would make is yes, this has been handled through the planning committee, and these are two important agreements that need to be put in place at this point in time. Michael's worked through the issues associated with them. I think they're fully ready to go. And we're down to one important remaining one, which is not on the agenda today, the confirmation agreement, as Michael said. And we'll be bringing that back. We're talking about the timing of that. It's an interesting question, but it's separate from what we're considering today. So.
Okay. So in terms of direction, can you please explore publishing percentage of renewable energy?
Yeah,
I know, a number of the other ski resorts, Snowmass as well as Jackson Hole, go out of their way to promote how information on renewable energy. And I think there's one back east to JP. I mean, I think we need another cost like a hole in the head at this point, but.
Well, I'm proposing that it could be a voluntary thing that customers could sign up for, in which case it would be neutral to us.
So at this point, we'll entertain a motion for approval of Resolution 1408, approving the scheduling coordinator services agreement between Shell Energy North America and the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District.
I'll move that we adopt that resolution. 1408.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. So moving to item 8E.
And now, is that the resolution 1409, right?
Yeah, I meant 8G, which is discussion and possible approval of Resolution 1409, approving the Master Power Purchase and Sale Agreement between Shell Energy North America and the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. I'll look for a motion approving that resolution.
I'd like to move approval of resolution number 14-09.
I'd like to second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So thank you, Braun Legal and Shell Energy,
And Don Dane?
and Don Dane. And if-
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to mention that Shell Energy is very excited for the opportunity to provide energy for the district and your venture. It's been fun to watch, and we look forward to delivering you energy starting in November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a brief,
Thanks, Michael.
brief comment, staff did a really nice job getting through a lot of new stuff that
Has
was
left the contents.
very complicated and pretty murky not so very long ago, and really nice. Appreciate it so much.
The pro forma in Exhibit A has,
Don Dane?
Has left the contents.
has November and December crossed out.
That's unintentional.
Intentional.
So
And
with the
left the
hedging
content.
strategy, you wouldn't.
Because this is just the hedging,
Yes.
Exhibit A. Okay, that's what I knew.
So-
Because the other is going to be in the actual procurement.
Right.
Okay.
And what Bob was referring to, and I
Right.
appreciate the way you put that in front of Shell Energy, that was perfect, Bob. But the hedging strategy is extremely important to the district, and that's really where the decision is when you start hedging, because when you hedge,
Right.
you're actually buying something. I mean, it's a purchase.
Yeah, you own it.
You own it, so.
So we want to avoid buying it before we have anything connected to get it to us.
That would make sense.
Yeah,
So
so
there's-
appreciate, but Shell has been terrific to work with, and appreciate working, moving forward.
Okay.
Dave Riley, thank you so much for your patience. We're going to move on to,
8D,
great,
presentation and possible action regarding Exponential Engineering's electric power quality study and recommendations for the Kirkwood Valley.
Robert Pierce with Shell Energy.
Has left the contents.
the last few years, our district has been working on a power quality issue to gain an understanding of how is the power quality in Kirkwood now. What issues are there and what issues are okay? Impacts to customers from problems, and what are the impacts of any problems that are found? What impact will the connection to the national grid have to the power quality in the valley? What can be done to resolve or to mitigate any problems found? And who will pay for these, solutions? So Dave Wrightley was hired by the district, I think back in March, to complete a power quality study, and he's here today with a PowerPoint presentation to show his findings. So Dave, your PowerPoint will be up in a second. It's a PDF. And
Thank you, Michael, and good morning again to everybody. It's a pleasure to be working with you all again on this assessment we made. I'm on how about the screen electrical terms, Michael, the second slide?
we are there.
So I would like to go through some definitions, just make sure we all understand we're talking about the same concepts. These are all terms you've heard many times, but let's do basic electricity 101. Voltage measured in volts. That is what your powerhouse generates. You put voltage on your wires, and it's important that when
when you're generating power, putting it up on your system, that the magnitude and the frequency of that voltage are correct. As you know, we're 60 hertz for our frequency. Magnitude is how power is delivered to the customers. If you have a 110 volt outlet, you need 110 volts. If you have a 480 volt motor, you need 480. Current, ampere, measured in amperes. When somebody turns on a light, turns on a motor, then they draw current from your wires because your voltage is out there. It's similar to the flow of water in a water pipe. We talk a lot about power, and specifically real power measured in watts. That's the power that you provide to your customers that is useful. It can turn a motor shaft, it can turn on lighting, it can power electronics. We've talked and will talk some more about reactive power measured in VAR, volt amperes reactive. That is power that is used to, for one thing, magnetize the motor so that the motor works properly. Another example of reactive power is things like capacitance, which can occur from a long underground power line. As you know, we've discussed this on talking about the out valley. And then power factor, which I know we've discussed quite a few times, is just the relationship between the real and reactive power. How much of each of those two elements is being transmitted around in your system. Can we go to the next slide, Michael? Fundamental power flow.
Right there.
So the top line is the voltage. Just imagine that you are putting that voltage on your wires from your powerhouse, or in the future from the Out Valley project. When your customer turns on a light or a motor, it'll draw power in the form of the amps. You can measure this current flowing. This simple graph shows that power is the volts times the amp, the fundamental power equation, and the watts are the power that's flowing. Let's move on to the next slide. I'm going kind of quickly, but please interrupt me if you have any questions. Again, we want to talk about power factor. It's been discussed in the past. I want to remind the board that when Exponential did the construction work plan for KMPUD, which was required for the RUS financing, we built a model of your distribution system, and we even modeled various levels of power factor that we expect were on the system due to the number of motors and commercial and residential loads. In our report back then in 2011, we reported there was not a problem with power factor. Power factor can result in low voltage. We're not experiencing anything like that. So we've assessed it there. We've certainly had to assess reactive power and power factor in looking at the Out Valley because of the long underground power line. And as you know, our design and our plan to mitigate the reactive power for Out Valley is with the reactor, which is going to be installed at KM Blue, and you saw that earlier today in the drawing of the substation arrangement. Power factor is not related to power quality issues at the district right now. I wanted to just get that up front, that what we measured and what we're going to talk about today is power quality that is not impacted by the power factor. If we could go to the next slide. In order for us to measure the district's power quality, we worked with Brandy and her staff, and 3 power quality recording meters were installed on the system, one on each separate of your feeders, the commercial, residential, and the lifts. We want to see what kind of power is being created by the powerhouse. In looking at the voltage, and we recorded, by the way, over a 2-month period, we were recording values every 15 minutes for 2 months. In that period of time, the voltage that we measured, the voltage magnitude was adequate, was certainly within acceptable utility ranges. In other words, your 110 volts was 110 volts, your 480 volts was 480 volts. The frequency stayed very, very close to 60 hertz the entire time that we recorded. We would have seen problems that could have occurred when you start a large motor, but the generators in the powerhouse were responding very well, and we did not see any frequency problems. In looking at the voltage, we did see some voltage distortion. I'm going to talk some more about distortion, but the voltage distortion that is on your system at all 3 feeders was acceptable, in an acceptable range, except at times when the chairlifts were operating. We could clearly see during certain times of day in our measurements that chairlift operations created more distortion on the voltage. Distortion occurs when large electric loads draw power in a distorted way. Now, our consumers don't do this on purpose. They do this because they have critical needs for the way the motor runs. Typically, our consumers will install a variable frequency drive, a VFD, and the VFD then is used to to adjust the motor, for example, a chairlift motor, so that the chairlift can be operated safely and correctly. VFDs have unique distortion signatures. I want to talk about that a little bit. And the most important thing to remember is that the larger the motor on your system that has a VFD, then the larger the impact it's going to have on your voltage. If we could go to the next slide, graphical example of distorted power. We there, Michael?
Yes, sir.
If you don't have a variable frequency drive, you're looking at the top line of this graph, the fundamental, that is something that's drawing power at 60 hertz. What these variable frequency drives do, it's inherent in the way they're designed, is they also draw power at multiples of the 60 hertz. In this case, third harmonic, fifth harmonic, 11th, and 17th. I use these particular ones in this graph because those are very commonly seen in older style variable frequency drives, which is typically a 6-pulse drive. When we sum up all of these harmonics and we look at how the power is being drawn by this motor off of your system, we see the yellow sine wave down at the bottom. It's not much of a sine wave. It's basically a dirty-looking wave, and that is how that motor would be drawing power from your system. When that occurs with a large motor on your system, we actually then start seeing that distortion occurring in your voltage throughout the valley, throughout your customer's system. The next slide is a bar graph we created, voltage harmonics measured on the KMPUD system. We saw similar numbers on all 3 feeders, and what we see here is you can see a lot of voltage harmonics on the 5th. You're seeing the 3 phases here. The 3 colors are phase A, phase B, and phase C. With the 5th harmonic, the 7th, the 11th, 13th, 17th, 19th, 23rd, we can see that your voltage, as you're presenting it to your customers, is distorted because of these particular harmonics. And I want to point out to the board that these harmonics are the exact signature of variable frequency drives. We're seeing the result of known equipment, variable frequency drives, impacting your system voltage. These harmonic levels go down significantly when the lifts are not running. I'm moving on to the next slide, conclusions. Based on the measurements we made, the powerhouse output is within acceptable utility levels except during operation of the lifts. This distorted voltage that we measured can impact the system and your customers in a number of ways. It can, if distortion gets excessive, it can damage your own transformers. The power cables that carry our power were designed to carry 60 hertz power, and you can create excess heating in a cable with distorted power, with distorted voltage. If you're running a motor that expects to see 60 hertz power and it's got distorted voltage coming into it, it can have increased vibrations, which can lead to damage or wear and tear on the motor. And certainly we can get misoperation of electronic equipment, computers, TVs. They are designed to expect a 60 hertz source. And that distorted voltage, if it gets too high, too much distortion, will not look as much like the 60 hertz source of power. And in fact, high distortion levels on a system can result in reduced accuracy of your own metering. Your meters won't work as accurately measuring power. One other conclusion I want to bring out is that the out-valley system is not going to significantly improve the distortion we've measured on your system. One way to look at this is the strength of your powerhouse. We look at the amount of power that it puts out is somewhat similar to the strength of power that's going to be received from the out-valley. And that's the northern grid is a strong system, but after we carry it through 25 miles of underground line, it's going to be something similar to what we see with the powerhouse. So do not expect improvement in distortion just because of out-valley. Next slide is recommendations. So of course what we're recommending is to mitigate these specific chairlift loads that are exceeding your own regulation. You do have an electric service regulation that's a very standard utility regulation that asks your customers to meet an IEEE standard 519 for distortion that would occur at the point where you deliver them power. We have some information, some of the recordings we made showed us that some of the lifts already exceed that level. Mitigation can be accomplished a number of ways. You can install filters on these VFDs. maybe a filter's not working, needs to get repaired. Newer VFDs have a lot less distortion, so just replacement of a VFD, either one that failed or for the reason, maybe the reason of upgrading, can definitely mitigate and reduce distortion. In our report, I've included estimated costs for a very basic way to filter these things out. I'm not going to put myself in the shoes of the ski area and know what their plans are for their motors, for their variable frequency drives. What I provided to the district staff in my report is if you just put in passive shunt filters, which can be effective in filtering, here are some estimated costs of doing that. You certainly want to continue looking at your voltage distortion through, on your utility. That's something that Brandy and her staff can do easily by reading values off these meters on a periodic basis. Motors can be changed. VFDs may change in the future. Filters may stop working correctly. So it's important to keep an eye on it as you're providing electricity to your consumers. We certainly recommend that you educate your large power consumers about the problems with this distortion and the different methods that should be used to mitigate them. And lastly, of course, whenever anybody's going to connect a new large motor to your system in the future, you want to make sure that it's installed with adequate filtering so that it meets your own regulations. So essentially, you've got clean power, except it has distortion occurring during operation of chairlifts. That distortion can lead to some damage and misoperation of equipment, and we recommend that those larger motors be filtered so to bring the distortion level down. I went through that kind of quickly. Be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think it's really important. I mean, obviously we have the ability to enforce our regulations. I think it's really important that we interface with the ski area so that they maximize the value that they spend. It's my understanding that they plan to replace the drive motor this summer on Chair 2, and they haven't selected a filter at this time, and that some of the data that Dave has supplied in his report is outdated, and I would really recommend that you interface directly with lift maintenance, Jason Fontenot in particular, so that we can effectively resolve these issues to everybody's benefit.
Okay. Bob?
Dave, I had questions about the report. I mean, the recorded results, you did chairlifts 7 and 4. Were those picked for a particular reason out of all the choices available?
We started with lift 7 not because I had a concern about that lift, but because it was strategically located on the lift feeder. I tried to get worst case measurements on all 3 feeders, and lift 7 happened to be near the end of that feeder, which would show us worst case. Subsequent to that, Randy and her staff, because we collected enough data there, they moved it and got us some additional recordings just to kind of augment and supplement the data that we had.
Okay, and 4 was measured at the lift or at the start of the line at the lift? Okay, and then you also looked at Timber, I'm just trying to remember, Timber Ridge, and you found distortion there, but that was from the lifts or from the actual facility?
First of all, I had the wrong name for the location of the meter. So first of all, Brandy pointed out to me that meter was installed at the Meadows, not at Timber Ridge, and it was where we wanted it, and it was actually metering the commercial feeder. But what I think to answer your question, I want to point out that the 3 meters, when they were on the 3 feeders, the lifts, the residential, and the commercial, all 3 meters recorded similar voltage distortion. The voltage distortion that was created by these distorted loads on the chairlifts permeates throughout the system because of the magnitude of the distortion. We saw it in all 3 feeders.
Okay, so Timber Ridge Housing Facility was just the point of measurement, it wasn't the facility.
And it should state the Meadows.
And it should have stayed the Meadows. And then the other one in here was the shop? lower shop, and that's
Right.
where.
Vehicle shop.
In lower shop,
Repeat, Rick.
that's on the residential feeder. Lower shop is at the very end of the residential feeder.
Okay, so, all right. It's just confusing the report. I didn't know what, because the lifts you're actually, it's still the point of measurement, but how do you know the relationship between that and what's putting out the distortion?
I think the answer is turning on and off the
For
channels.
those,
Yeah.
for those, I'm sorry.
So there's
For
four.
the meters that were,
Yeah, go ahead.
for the meters that were installed on the lift, again, remember that the purpose of my measurements was to measure the voltage, because that is the background, that is what the district was providing, and we measured it.
Right.
But since we had the meter there on the lifts, for those particular lifts we measured, we were able to measure the current, the load, and therefore we could see how much distortion that particular lift had.
Okay. I got it.
The locations of where we place the quality meters were at the end of the line so that we could measure the entire line. But the distortion that we're seeing on the residential and commercial feeds were once again due to the chair lifts.
Okay.
Any other questions, or did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, question. I'm working on the assumption that we have to resolve these issues before we can connect to the national power grid because of two things. One is that there's a spec that we're not enforcing on our current customers, but when we connect to the national power grid, I would presume somebody could then enforce those regulations against us as the person that's drawing power from them and say, sorry, we're not going to give you power because it doesn't, your draw attributes are incompatible with our system providing the electricity. Is that a fair assumption?
No, I don't believe that assumption. Dave, do you know if PG&E has a provision in the IA that has a 5% harmonic distortion regulations? And would
I
it-
don't believe there's a specific 5% number in the IA, but I believe there is language that talks about using good utility practices at the interconnection. And now I want to point out that the distortion that we're seeing will be substantially less at the point of interconnection 25 miles away at the KM Green substation. But it could, if the distortion was enough, it will be seen all the way back there at KM Green. But I'm not aware of any specific language that says 5% with PG&E.
Okay, so we don't think that they would stop providing a service. That's good to know. Second question is, what I understood is that there is some potential for equipment being damaged because of distortion. We haven't yet seen that in our own powerhouse operations, but presumably that could happen to some equipment upstream of us on PG&E or our new distribution
It's
system.
happened to residences already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair point. I guess I'm just zeroing in on, if we're in discussions with PG&E about O&M and what do those costs get used for, well, if we damage one of their transformers, that would certainly be an example of something that we've got to be positioned to avoid, right? Is there a significant risk that we might damage something in the upstream equipment that's providing our new electric service, the optimum?
So as Dave mentioned, the impact at KM Green is going to be far less than what it's going to be here in the distribution. I think the impacts that we see here in the valley and mostly on the distribution system are the greatest impact for this above 5% distortion ratio.
So the capacitance of the transmission line helps you kind of isolate from this problem substrate. Third and last question is about the meters. We were last having a board meeting, we talked about how the meters that we had acquired were not the ones that they didn't have the capabilities we thought they were going to have. We were going to try to do something to remedy that. Has that been done?
Well, good news is that the meters that we did purchase actually do provide all of the services that we had hoped for, and we're now able to get on a real-time and a totalizing value all of those values. So actually the meters are working out really well for us.
So we thought we had a problem with meters, but it turns out that when we got up there to understand it better, that they're doing everything we wanted them to do.
Precisely an understanding issue. We just didn't understand the capabilities as well.
Any questions or comments from the audience?
So I just want to go back to the implementing the solution then. So if we add up the cost for passive shunt filters, your estimates, it's around $200,000 for all of the chair lifts that might require it. Is there, do they have to be, the filters when they're installed, do they have to be calibrated under full load, or can this, is there a time of year when this needs to be done?
The filters need to be customized and matched to the specific variable frequency drive. But you certainly, I think, would want to do it when the ski area is not in service. But it's a matter of customizing it, acquiring it, installing the cabinet, and wiring it in. And they would certainly want to test it when they install it.
So is it a reasonable project to try to accomplish during this summer and then verify in the fall?
Well, actually, why don't we, do you have a recommendation, Michael, in terms of next steps? Or?
I do. Okay. I still feel that we're in a gathering information stage. There are 4 filters currently out on the lifts themselves. 6 is filtered. I think, anyway, there's 4 different filters that the ski resort has put forth. We don't know exactly if those are working correctly. There's some doubt that those are actually working correctly. I feel that we need to move our power quality meters to the different lifts and see which lifts are giving us the most problems and which are filtering correctly. Dave is going to be out here next week, and he has offered to take a look at some of these filters and, you know, actually where the problems. We have 3 of these filters, and that's now that we've identified where the problem's coming from, I think we need to narrow it down to which lifts are causing the biggest problems. We've started conversations with Vail. They know the existence of this power quality study, and we've started our conversations with Vail. And what have they done? What are they doing at other resorts? Because they have this issue. This is
everywhere.
You know, what do they do at their other resorts? What plans do they have for replacements so that if Chair 2 is going to get a new drive, maybe they can do some of these filters actually. Shunt filters are after is one method, but there's actually filters that go on directly onto drives that are, I think, more effective that can measure these. So I think we're still in the process of gaining information, but I think Dave's report tells us that we have a problem, where that problem is, very importantly, what the impacts of that problem could be, the importance of the problem, and I think we need to work with the resort to resolve it.
So the question I have is, why is it not the resort's responsibility to now dig into this further, as opposed to our responsibility to, basically pay the cost of zero in on where the problems are, which filters should be replaced, or where filters needed, and so on. I mean, we have our regulation. We now have evidence, pretty good evidence, that the source of what the problem is and what the source of the problem is in general. Why is it our responsibility to bear the cost of going further than that?
I could say without a doubt that Chair 4 has a harmonics issue, and I can also say that Chair 7 does. I think I could probably say that Chair 10 does. We don't know the balance. We need to put a power quality meter on each of these to see what their harmonic distortion is to identify that, and then your point's well taken.
Yeah, no, I understand that we want to move around and so on, but zeroing in and figuring out whether a filter is working or not and what the best solution is and so on, okay, that's the customer's responsibility.
Well, finding out whether the filter's working tells us whether we have a harmonic problem or not. You know, just putting the power quality at each of the lifts.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of working with the resort as you propose. You said that other aspects of the report are inaccurate or out of date, meaning there are plans for Chair 2.
They have changed drives, and some of the filters listed in some of the pages I've been informed was inaccurate. So I just think when Dave's here, why not just sit down and have a conversation with the lift maintenance staff and maybe,
Okay.
how much is that going to cost?
So you've been informed that some of the filter information is
Right,
inaccurate?
is outdated.
Okay, outdated. I'd also like to request that we get Dave's report updated, to be as accurate as possible, both the meadows and any filters that have been changed out.
Well, and then we're really measuring the 3 distribution lines, and by calling them something other than distribution line 1, 2, and 3, or whatever, it's confusing because I thought we were measuring the lower shop.
Which
So
is the
if we could-
residential, which is actually the residential.
Yeah, so if we could just
It's-
clarify
well, it
the
isn't.
names there, I think it'd make very clear.
Yeah, I think the report being as accurate as possible with the names would help us with any negotiations that may be coming forward. And I think the answer to your question, Bob, is can we solve it this summer with 2 weeks left, maybe 3, 4? I think the answer is probably.
No, this summer, they would be installed during the, while the lifts are not being used.
Yeah, but my guess is to get the data agreed on with Vail. Do you think it's possible to solve it this summer?
No.
Okay.
Potentially.
Is Vail aware of the issues and the distortions and all
Yeah,
that?
that's why there's 4 filters out there already, and they're aware of the power quality studies that we produced in the past, and they're aware of the existence of this one.
Okay.
I met with them as recently as Friday and discussed it.
But it's all cost on their end, right? So.
Right, but you've got regulatory power if they are harming based on your regulations, and you know that. I mean, I'm sure they want to be good citizens and not be, do anything outside of the rules and regs, so. And you only have a couple of weeks, to move your monitoring stuff around to see, in fact, what lifts are problematic. Then you can have the summer to figure it out.
I'm hearing nothing that says that the resort is unwilling to address this issue. If they've
Right.
installed filters, that says they're, in fact, actively trying to move forward.
Well, they suffer the same consequences that the homeowners do in terms of equipment failures.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. I think that we have an opportunity here with the change of ownership to take more of a long-term investment strategy rather than just put a Band-Aid on everything and spend as little money as possible, which is historical method. Not to get too technical. Their fiscal year starts in August. I think the sooner that we interface with them, the better.
I agree. So I think you have direction. Is there anything else on 8D?
No, thank you very much, David, for joining us.
Thanks for your time, Dave.
You're very welcome. Have a good rest of your meeting.
So I think we're switching gears here from electricity to water and wastewater, starting with 8H. Welcome back.
Hello, good morning.
So 8H is presentation and update by the district's water/wastewater engineer on wastewater membrane warranty compliance, water supply study funding sources, update of the sewer system management plan and potential district summer projects. Michael Sharp and Matt Wheeler, district engineer.
I'd like to introduce and welcome Matt into the board meeting, and I'll let you go ahead and do your.
Thank you. If it pleases the board, I'll take each subject individually, just quickly, broad brush, but allow questions for each piece unless you'd rather I go through the whole thing in one shot. So, all right. I presented a project status update to staff earlier this week, or into last week, and going through that just from the top down, we'll start membrane warranty compliance. Our wastewater treatment plant membranes were installed into last year. They've been operating. That project is final, and they've been operating well. We've focused our activities in the last couple of months on making sure that warranty compliance is forefront for us, and that we are actually performing all of the activities for maintenance, operations, and recording that in order to maintain warranty compliance. And so this last month, we put together basically a mock submittal as if we were going to make a warranty claim to see that we were truly recording and reporting those operational parameters in accordance with the O&M manual. Right now, we're still working with staff through that. There are some noted deficiencies in what we've got on record versus what we know we're already performing and what's available in the system hardware to record. So putting together some templates and format in order to make sure that if we do have to pull the trigger on a warranty compliance, that it won't be a challenge for us to pull together information. That will be something that we do on a routine basis. And for the near future, at least, staff's asked that we prepare this information and review it for the next couple of months just to make sure that we're on the track. Similar to what we do for permit compliance with our water systems and our wastewater systems already. Any questions on that?
Anybody from the board have any questions? Audience? I guess the answer is no.
All right.
As far as a staff level, Derek, our superintendent is here. And as far as the capacity and performance level, how's the membranes been working, Derek?
Excellent. I'm really pleased with how they've been performing. Yesterday we had some of our highest flows in the spring, about 85,000 gallons. The plant didn't even flinch, whereas the previous plant would have had problems with it. We would have seen the flow equalization basin come up. We would have stressed about it, didn't see anything. The pinch point used to be the membranes, flowing just perfectly through them. Transmembrane pressures haven't reflected any increased flow, so I'm very pleased.
You mentioned 85,000 gallons. Is that the capacity of one half of the trains?
Yes.
So we have another train all
Yeah, we have redundancy. We could have lost a train over the night last night, wouldn't even bother the plant at all. Might have seen a little rise in transmembrane pressure, but other than that, very happy with compared to previous years where I'm usually stressed in the spring. No stress at all.
And you can dial the plant in from 33% operational to 66 to 100%.
Absolutely.
What are you at now, 66?
We're at 66 currently.
At percent of capacity, with 80-some thousand.
6 gallons a minute capacity on each train.
Thank you.
So from a membrane project standpoint, that project went really well. We're very happy with it. What we're doing now is proactive planning and making sure that if we had a problem, we'd be able to react to it and have a great leg to stand on to effectively warranty claim.
Yeah, all reports are it was a very successful project. Thank you very much.
Follow up on our water permit inspection. The Department of Public Health came through, and we had a report that was generated from that included several items we needed to complete. We've responded to most of those items. They had a January, either a December and a January deadline. Some of the longer lead items included operator certification and a few summer projects. Those are in the queue, and we have cleared up some of the data, the lab data reporting problems that we had with our lab and the Department of Public Health's database. And so from that standpoint, that project is going well as well. Probably the largest item on the list is this drought fund relief, or drought relief funding, and the surface water project. In January and February of this year, there was some concern that our aquifers may be drawing down, and we put some effort into reviewing what our measurements are of the aquifers and calibrating the pressure transducer, seeing if in fact we were going to see a problem with the drought that was currently underway, that is currently underway. And as part of our district engineering, we attended some funding workshops and looked into what the emergency funds that could be available to the district to seek from a grant or a low-interest loan standpoint as part of relief. The Caples Lake Water Project was identified as part of our capacity study as something that we will want to do or need to do in the future. We've recommended it. However, in response to drought, we may need to pull the trigger earlier on that. At least that was the case we were looking at back in February. And so the two big line leaders for funding is the USDA. They have an emergency community water grant program, and we could be eligible up to $500,000 of funding under that program. our project as described as a reliability and capacity project in response to drought would probably yield us that level of funding. In order to receive that kind of funding, we'd have to show that we could complete the project upon a commitment of funds within 2 years. Our total project cost to do a surface water project with Caples Lake is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. If we were to do it with grant monies, it would cost a little bit more than that. There's certain reporting requirements and additional costs that we'd probably see. So from just that funding source, we'd be short by at least half the funds. The IRWM program, that's an integrated regional water management program, that got a boost of funds from the governor as part of the latest Senate bill. And broad brush, the way you get funds through an IRWM program is you join an IRWM group. We fall within the Consumnes, American Bear, Yuba River group. There are groups all over the state. And joining onto their program, you get your projects included in their full list of projects. They get to submit it to the Department of Water Resources for funding. And so the means in order to qualify for that $200 million grant monies that is being released here later this summer would be to get on their program list. We have not been a part of this CABI IRWM group in the past, but that doesn't keep us from joining now and getting on the list. The latest information that came out from IRWM is that they've released preliminary project application submittal packages. Those are in a review program right now, and the finals will be done around June. And at that time, we expect that the deadline will be shortly thereafter, funds coming out sometime in August through November. Pragmatically speaking, that means we would need to adopt the CABI's IRWM program. This is that program, this document. We would review it, decide whether or not we wanted to adopt it and join into their program, and then get included in that projects list that would be seeking drought relief funding. It's hard to tell whether or not we would actually be successful in either getting in their projects list, because that CABI group would then prioritize the projects, and then if CABI got funding, how that would be disseminated amongst the group. So from a broad brush standpoint, can we go after and actually get money enough to affect a Caples Lake project? It looks like lower chances. However, our latest reports are that aquifers are holding. We don't yet see a drawdown effect from the drought, and with the latest snow, we don't expect that we're going to be in a real emergency mode coming forward. My recommendations are that we consider joining a group like this, because there will be subsequent rounds of funding for the current water bond and future water bonds, that we would then be in a program and ready to receive funding that would possibly pay for the studies, pay for some of the expenses that we know we will incur as we move forward and look to perfect a surface water project in the future. Questions on that?
What's the cost of being a member of this group?
Mostly time. So it'd be sending someone, either staff or your consultants, to their meetings. They meet quarterly and put together these programs. And it's $1,000 a year to be a member that sits on their planning committee. So as an entity for $1,000, you get in and you can get included in their program.
Matt, I have 2 questions. The first one is, if you participate in a program, let's say you get funded through a state water bond, don't we pay back that loan? Or does the state do it as a general obligation and we just get the free benefits?
The IRWM monies are grant monies.
They're grant, okay.
And they're often reimbursed monies. So you spend the money out front or get a bridge loan, and then they get reimbursed to you whenever you do it.
Okay.
But
so they're grants, no?
They are grants.
Okay. My second question is, in a year when our aquifer wasn't adequate, why would we count on the lake having water? I mean, isn't our aquifer and the lake's level kind of correlated, or why do we think that the water would be in one place but not in the other?
From the groundwater hydrogeology reports I've looked at, it looks like direct recharge from the melt and runoff within the meadow and within this valley
Right.
is what recharges our aquifers.
Right.
Whereas Cable's Lake has a watershed above it. And there is a set aside of those 200 acre feet that is still available for.
But the set aside, assuming there's actually water there.
My understanding of the way the lake needs to be managed is that those water rights will remain in effect, so that the PG&E or EID can't draw out additional water to take for power or for consumptive use downstream and leave the rest of the water right users without their water.
So the only thought I have, and I know this isn't directly related to the grant programs and so on, is just to encourage us to continue to perfect the rights to whatever acre feet we want, we think we will need, whether it's 60 or 70 or 100. You know, just pay the fee to the Water Resources Board and whatever legal fees necessary to gain those rights, but not go any further. I mean, I don't think that there's any reason to take action on the rights, but I think it's important to now get the right, make sure that we have the right to that water.
So we've got action items, of course, from the planning committee side to do exactly that. The preliminary meeting with the water board is going to be scheduled soon, and hopefully you'll be involved in that. And the question will be, do we have a reasonable path to perfecting our rights to that Cable's Lake water, and have at least a directional signal as to whether or not it makes sense to pursue, and we can come back here and talk about the when, where, and how we pursue it at that point.
I support that direction. It looks like people are nodding here too.
Well, because our main issue is managing growth. I mean, it's
Right now, that's
at the moment.
that's
Yeah.
the issue. We don't know.
It could be something else in the future,
But I think just getting, nailing that down without doing anything around planning the construction or what the treatment plant would be, or doing the EIR associated with that, that can come later, but just perfecting the right would be a big step.
There will presumably be cost and time involved in perfecting the rights, but we'll understand that better after the meeting with the water board. And as I think our Augusta leader said, we probably need another expense like a hole in the head. So, aggressively pursuing the water situation, if it looks like it's really expensive, but we'll all have to, look at what makes sense given the facts as they come forward.
One question remains. There is a short fuse right now on these emergency funds and the timelines, both for the USDA as well as the IRW. Those are both going to come up deadlines because of the current state of emergency. Do we stay engaged for a little while and put together preliminary applications so that we can pull the trigger if we need to, or do we take the slower
It
race?
sounds nice to be in a group that could potentially assist us in getting grants, and that's what I think you're saying you want us to respond to. If it's what's really modest cost, I wouldn't have any reason to say no to that, but realistically, we haven't even figured out whether or not we can perfect water rights from Cable's Lake. It's cart before horse, right?
Not really shovel ready, which is what these funds are intended for.
Yeah, we don't even know if we got a shovel, Right?
Michael, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, from reviewing these opportunities, it looks like we should stay engaged, as Matt was mentioning. But our real goals are more longer term for these. The relationship with USDA, the relationship with IRM and the CABY group is a longer term grant for the water rights, and to pursue the water rights, but to stay in touch and engage with these groups is what staff recommendation.
So not to join the...
No, I would definitely join CABY, and because they're going to get drought funds in the fall.
Right.
Our opportunity as a brand new member to get any of those funds is very little to nil. But if next year, if a new round of funding goes through, we have a better opportunity, and maybe we're, we have perfected our rights and we're up in line. So we need to get in line.
Okay.
We need to get engaged with these folks, get our place in line, and
So join these groups.
The USDA isn't a group, but there is a preliminary application that I've asked for from staff. They were closing the loop on a couple of questions internally. These are all very new programs.
Okay.
And whether or not to even fill that out is kind of the question, and see what it's like. It's probably very minimal effort to do a preliminary application to see what we really are qualified to get in Kirkwood for emergency funds, whether or not we're qualified for, surprisingly, a disadvantaged community funding, because our census data for the residents shows that we aren't.
Okay.
And so that'll answer a question. And so,
Well, so I see a lot of nods around the table. I think you've got support for that direction.
I think we were just called a name, but that's okay.
so moving forward then.
Somebody said maybe to be called that, I'm going to vote for it.
And that was a specific question with the staff. Is it residents or is it people that own property? And from the resident census data, it looks like we could qualify.
Let's go for it. Yeah, I'm looking better. So nothing else, is there anything else on 8H?
But a couple more items actually. Okay, sorry. We're following up with a request from Vail on whether or not they can pave the parking lots out front. That's our disposal field, and we'll be getting an answer from the Regional Water Board, who operates our permit for our facilities and disposal field on that. And then we've identified several. Go ahead.
To the uninitiated, I can't. How far? We're below ground.
Yes.
How far down?
6 to 8 feet.
What?
2.5 feet.
2.5. I heard 6 to 8.
Any one end.
Yeah, let's talk about how these are designed. So the pipe, it's a pressure-filled absorption bed. The pipe is actually about 2.5 feet.
Okay.
The bed itself, the gravel bed that's below it, is about 4 feet down. So we're actually both right.
You're both right.
Yeah. So, so the question is can Vail, when you've seen this in the spring,
right.
Normally this is a mud hole,
right.
Can they pave over it, or does that impede the biological reaction of a absorption deck? So one of the items is possibly doing, pavers or grates or something to leave the oxygen.
Something that's semi-permeable.
Right.
In the past, when I've come across this question, it's a single-family residence or a single user, and it's an on-site disposal system. Those are regulated by the health department. The health departments typically say no. Ours is regulated by the Regional Water Board as far as the permit. And so asking them the question, the first frank answer was, I've never been asked that before. And so we're asking them formally to address whether or not we can pave it.
And do we have an opinion over whether it's...
For us, we need to be able to get in there and access and maintain it. So they would pave at risk. If we needed to dig them up to fix them, then we'd be digging them up to fix them.
And it's in both the upper and lower ones?
Yes.
There's three.
There's three levels there.
There's 2 absorption beds
I see.
for each bed.
Right.
And you can see our wonderful markers on each of them. Those 4 posts right there is one of our valve stations.
Got it. Okay.
And they're a lot deeper than they used to be, because soil has been added.
I appreciate getting educated, so thank you.
Certainly. We've got a list of planned summer projects, and this is a combination of things that were identified in our DPH inspection for the water system, things that are part of our regulatory compliance with either the Regional Water Board on our wastewater treatment plan, or even our sewer system management plan, which we adopted a few years back. There's some new rules that have come out on that. And then some discretionary, I'll call them discretionary projects, like the wastewater collection system infiltration, or going forward with a SCADA system upgrade at the wastewater plant. So those are in the queue. Some of those we may decide not to do this year, depending on need. But the regulatory ones we will need to move forward on. I'll touch base briefly in the SSMP. We adopted this a couple years back. We're required every 2 years to do an audit, and it's an internal audit, it's an effectiveness. There have been new rules adopted and law generated by the State Water Board, which will require an actual update of this plan. We're due to have our audit by June, and so by June we should just update it and then bring it back to this board for certification. Other than that, I believe you've read the update report, and if you have any questions on any of the specific projects, I'd be happy to expand on.
No questions, just thank you for being so diligent on our behalf.
My pleasure.
It's a very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. Any questions? Either? Audience? So why don't we move on to 8I, which is the introduction, discussion, and possible approval of a master services agreement with Bennett Engineering as the new parent company of District Engineer Matt Wheeler, and extension of WDR compliance reporting task order. So you have a new parent, is that correct?
Yes, I've taken a job with another firm, joined on a team. And so, joining part of that team, I'd like to remain your district engineer. The benefit to you is that it's a fully functioning team and might be even more responsive than in the past on some of the production items. So I've got president of the company with me, Warren Bennett has come today. I'd like to meet you. The task order specifically in front of you is General District Engineering, Master Services Agreement, and then the WDR reporting, which we've already been doing for the last 3 years on annual and groundwater quarterly monitoring reports. So continuing on with those services, that's your direction.
Thank you. Michael, do you have any introductory comments, or what would you like to say on this?
I think you covered real well. I'd like to hear from Warren Bennett.
Welcome.
Well, members of the board and Michael, it's a pleasure to meet all of you and to see you in action. The quality board and some quality issues in front of you. If you don't mind, I'd like to spend just a couple minutes and talk about the company and what Matt has inherited and what you will benefit from. I've been doing this for a lot more years than I would like to admit, and it's an enjoyable thing for me. And I'd like to kind of explain a little bit about the history. The company as it exists today was established in 1995. We primarily service small cities, counties, small and large, but cities, counties, and special districts just like you. We offer two areas of technical concentration, and that's water resources, which is of course the things that we provide here, and transportation services that we do primarily for cities and counties. We have a highly technical and very experienced staff. We've got approximately 25 folks, and I say approximately because we have a couple of engineers emeritus that are available to us for quality control assistance and advice when we get to those technical issues that we need some assistance on. Of those, 11 of them are licensed, and 7 of those have experience of 30 years or more. So we have a fairly highly technical and highly experienced staff, primarily for the purpose of providing quality and timely service to folks like the district. I guess without going into a lot of detail, we are extremely selective in our hiring practices. It took us almost 2 years to find Matt. We're very client service oriented, deal primarily with our primary issue is making sure that those that service to clients such as Matt are focused in that direction, and the selectivity of hiring usually comes about primarily about culture and how we work together and how the staff relates. Matt fits very well with that, and we're very, very pleased to have him. We think he's going to be an excellent member of our management team. It's very clear that this is a very important client to him, and I want you to understand it'll remain a very important client of Ben Engineering. He will have a staff, as he mentioned, quality folks available to him to provide whatever assistance is needed and to make sure that we meet schedules and budgets as we move forward on projects that are important to you. So be willing to answer any questions or address any other issues you might have.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, just one question. Does this make a change in the cost of the service to us?
My specific rate does go up as part of this. However, when you look at a blended rate for staff, I don't believe you'll see a cost difference. At least not noticeable. The value you'll get is on par with what you do.
And where were you hiding such that it took them 2 years to find you?
Because you're both in Roseville, right?
That's right.
It must have been a hell of a hunt.
We met recently, and through some discussion, I determined that the core values of Bennett Engineering fit well with the core values that I retained in Matt Wheeler Engineering and where I've served in the past. And so started looking at each other as to whether or not we'd like to join forces. And so that's where it went.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you. I'd like to address the cost a little bit. We are extremely cost conscious because most of our clients are concerned about that, obviously. We find that our rates are extremely competitive. We have retained, as I mentioned before, remain small primarily to make sure we provide good service, but it also keeps us overhead low and very competitive. So Matt's rate will go up from where he was, but I think you'll find that the overall rate for the projects that are delivered will be very similar to what you've experienced.
And just so I know, what will the rate go from to for your rate?
I believe the new rate is around 170 an hour, and it was 125 going up to 130. So
that's a new rate for us beginning this year, but I think what we need to say also is that the folks that will be assisting him doing some of the work that Matt was doing himself are going to be ranging in the 95 to 125 range, and I think should offset most of those costs.
So, Michael, you're telling us you don't expect a cost increase?
Exactly. I think it should be pointed out that our master services agreement is on a time and material for general services for things that I direct Matt to research and look at. But any large projects, any projects such as capacity studies, this major, the waste discharge permit is done on a task order basis, and those task orders come before the board for approval.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
So I guess at this point, your recommendation is that we approve the master services agreement and the WDR compliance task order?
Yes, sir.
Entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So it passes unanimously. Congratulations.
we'd be happy to stay later if you'd like to meet and talk with us afterwards. Let me know.
We're going to show off our water meters pretty soon.
So, well, thank you. At least in my case, I've seen enough of you over the last meeting. Don't take that negatively, take that positively.
All right.
Thank you. Good work. So moving on to item 8J, continued review and possible action regarding the revision of Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District's capital plan and potential impacts on developer connection fees. Michael Sharp. We'll kick that off, but before we do, I think it's the case that this has been considered several times by the Finance Committee as well as the Capital and Operations Committee and the Planning Committee, is that correct?
In the sense that we've been talking about how to do connection fees as it relates to employee housing, yes.
So it's been vetted by those three committees, is that right?
Yeah, it has been. It's not the first time this has been presented. So the capital plan, as the committee is aware, staff has been revising our capital plan and dividing our capital plan into two components. One, capacity for what we would need to build or expand our existing infrastructure to accommodate additional units, and the second being replacements, the normal replacements of existing infrastructure due to normal wear and tear. The capacity portion would be the basis for future connection fees. The total cost per fund would be divided by the expected number of units to be built to come up with a new connection fee. The fee would be for a single unit. Commercial units would be charging multiple of single units based on their projected usage or flow. So their engineer would have to give us a usage data so we could divide that by an average residential to come up with a connection fee for them. Water, under this fee, water has one of the largest demands due to the potential need for additional tanks. Its total cost is somewhere around $2.8 million. Wastewater shows capacity's portion of the recent, a portion of the recent membrane upgrade. The membrane upgrade portion is split out between replacement, because it replaced existing membranes, plus capacity, because it has the capacity for future, so it's shown in both components. Overall cost for wastewater is about $1.8 million. Fire department shows the need for a ladder truck, a fire truck, and a light rescue. Total cost of about $951,000. The fire department capital is funded through not a connection fee, but a fire impact, which now sets at 47 cents per burnable square foot. It's not a conditioned space, it's burnable, so decks are also included rather than just conditioned space. The electric shows a portion of the out valley expense attributed to the increase in the size of the line from 5 megawatt to a 10 megawatt. Also forecast the upgrade of the powerhouse to allow up to 8 megawatts of generators should the board choose to upgrade the facility. Total cost of electricity is $4.2 million.
Okay, I think you just answered the question I was going to ask. That's the amount of dollars of electric capital that you can attribute to increasing capacity?
Is included in the electric capacity component.
And then I was asking specifically, what is the capacity increase?
$1.6 million.
$1.6 million.
Propane calls for 2 more tanks, some distribution improvements for a cost of $634,000. Connection fees, which are reflected on page 153, under this plan, would actually remain fairly stable. As you can see, that the existing fee for water is at $1,916. That would actually go up to $3,400. Wastewater, which is at $6,000. And by the way, wastewater and water were developed in, I think, 1990, so it's been a while since these have been changed. Wastewater would go down actually to $2,200. Electric from the, these are the amounts that were agreed to in the original APA and establishing the rates. They're at $19.63. They would actually go up to $51.66. Propane would remain somewhat stable at $7.50 to $7.80. The fire impact fee would show the largest increase. It would go from a square footage basis of 47 cents up to a square footage basis of 81 cents. This assumes 100% build out, 1,413 units. Commercial spaces would be based on 1,000 square foot per unit. The actual charge would be based on the demand needs. Staff recommends that the board president call for a public hearing on May 10th to hear public input and possibly approve enabling ordinances. And that concludes my
So the Finance Committee has worked on this the last couple of meetings. I just want to point out 2 major things that we discussed. One is employee housing, and each each of the services. We're asked to project how many employees might go into that. And so the employee housing costs, if we decide to move in that direction, are embedded in those as opposed to a standalone item, because that more clearly represents how the costs are used.
I did ask Michael to try to tease that back out so we could look at that as a separate item, even though it's not displayed as a separate item here, so.
Yeah, well, the full spreadsheet has them in there.
Yeah.
To look at it. And then the second one was Eric's suggestion of different ways of looking at how to fairly cover long-term costs with new people joining in. And we spent a lot of time going back and forth on that. And I think I think the answer we came up with here sort of reflects the fact that when someone joins in, there's a depreciated value of the asset, and they're paying the full depreciated value because that's embedded in the current rates. And so that's the way we thought about one aspect of it, was to try to reconcile the depreciated value with what people are paying. And then there's a couple other considerations we worked through, but we did try to look at that under a variety of different scenarios, and we ended up by consensus with the Finance Committee and the staff with where we are now. But I did appreciate the time and energy you put into trying to look at an alternative approach.
And I'm not giving up yet.
No, and you shouldn't, but I'm just saying that we did. And then we also tried to figure out what happens in year 36. Because some of the modeling that was done got really expensive in year 35, and then year 36 was unknown. And so trying to understand what would happen on that was the other factor that we tried to figure out. So anyway, you're probably not satisfied, but I want to let you know.
Impressed that you're worried about what's going to happen in 2051.
You're not.
I am impressed that you are.
Well, yeah, okay. But anyway, I do appreciate the time you put it in, and it's probably not a settled issue yet, but that's what we came up with as a team looking at it.
Yeah. So I talked briefly with Michael and Stanish about this yesterday, so I was aware I appreciate the conversations you've had. I wasn't aware of a depreciation issue that didn't come up. So just generally, so basically what that's saying is that in year 35, if that's the depreciation schedule,
yeah,
there is no value to that, to the outbound line that
we
others should be paying for.
We have depreciated its capital costs.
Well, I understand that from an accounting perspective,
right?
But in a practical perspective, we're saying that in year 36 we'll be replacing the entire line and starting over.
Well, there's the issue of what you can legally, your depreciation rate, and then what's the
Well, I
actual
know,
lifetime.
yeah. So there's
Those aren't always the same thing.
There's the accounting thing, but the one of the two basic assumptions that were in my analysis is that our rates cover the necessary maintenance and replacement costs so that the line is maintained in very good working order.
Right.
Ad infinitum.
Right.
And in that case, it's a line in good working order. So someone coming in year 30 is getting a line in good working order, but not paying for all the benefits that were the driving reasons for doing the line in the first place.
Right. They also are only receiving less value less time value than people
They'll
buy in on day
They'll
one.
be using it for 35 years too, because the line's in good working order.
So anyway, so I think that was the reason why we thought it might be good to have a public hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
So the assumptions are out there and the thinking's out there and can be corrected if flawed.
And the $1.6 million is what's in there with the logic as you described.
To cover new capacity.
Yeah, which is basically.
That people coming online are covering new
Yeah, no,
capacity.
I have no disagreement that the 1.6 million is reasonable for the capacity piece.
Yeah.
That's not why we did the line. It wasn't for capacity.
Right. I understand.
The employee housing piece is fair to state what the amount attributable just to that is. We know the figure.
It's 2.1 million.
Yeah, to 20, but the connection fee was $2,200 and some dollars per unit, if I recall.
It's, no, actually, it's $2.1 million divided by the number of units left to be constructed, which would be KM13, so. Whatever those numbers are.
What are those numbers again?
Yeah.
2.2 million? 2.1 million.
Divided by what's the number, 713?
813.
So 2583.
27, yeah. 27.
I get 2583.
The other
Sloppy number.
The other question I have, just in general, is it seems like, well, these are all present value numbers, right? So there's nothing, $750,000 in year 10 is not really $750,000, right? It's $750,000 times some multiplier. And I'm just wondering if, in the public hearing, we should be proposing, an annual increase or something, so that, in fact, it's always being kept up to date.
And we already have an annual increase programmed into our.
Not exceptions fees.
No.
We have those in our regular rates, but the connection, Eric's quite right. And the assumption is that we would come back and revisit this every few years, but an annual increase of the cost per year makes total sense as well. And we
So
should
that would
provide
be-
that to show
That would be a lower number to start with.
what's the present value. So
So it would be an increasing number.
right now, we're using the CPI. We would have, we would base it on some sort of a number moving forward and increase our current estimates by those amounts.
Yeah.
Our current estimates are only estimates, however. I mean, everything that's shown in the capital plan are estimates that will come back before the board for approval once we're ready to, when we have things shovel ready, so.
So do we want to include the increasing of the connection fees by the CPI as part of this process and this public hearing? Sounds like we like the idea, it makes all the sense in the world, so why wouldn't we?
I think the idea came up 3 minutes ago. I'd rather.
Yeah, I think it should just at least be considered, that's all. I'm just suggesting that it be
Sorry, I
considered.
wasted 3 minutes by not getting it on the table.
I think it's a good idea for what it's worth.
Yeah, I like the look at it.
And I'd rather include the CPI automatic increase than come back every 20 years to revise the connection fees, 24 years.
Given those two choices, I would understand that.
Any other comments or questions from the board or the audience of 3 remaining survivors? 2 of which work for the districts.
Yeah, and I hasten to add for Peter's, that my method would mean that if you pay your connection fees on this new project soon, it wouldn't be any different than what's proposed.
Yeah. Save now or pay later.
Brought my checkbook with me this Saturday.
What was that?
He brought his checkbook with him.
So 8I, would entertain a motion for the president to call a public meeting to consider revising connection fees and fire impact fees.
So move, public hearing.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that passes unanimously.
So we will actually advertise that public hearing 10 days in advance. We'll also produce ordinances that could be approved at that public hearing. We'll advertise this in the newspapers, post it up, and do all the legal requirements for the May 10th meeting.
Okay. So moving on to 8K, 2014-15 budget planning formulation. First presentation of overall budget template, 1-year income statement, and revised projections. Assistant Manager, Administration, Jill Campbell.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm going to go over some updated projections for the budget. I'm going to go ahead and start with how we came up with our budgeted production numbers. So up here, what we did is we took a 2-year average of our 2013 actual production for each department, along with our 2014 actuals through February, and then the budget through March through June. We initially were going to take a 3-year average But in all departments, 2012 was quite a bit lower than even this year projecting end, which would have shown our 2015 budget being lower this year, and it just didn't make a lot of sense, so we went with the 2-year average.
And these units, I've looked at these, but in some cases I was mystified what we measure here. Is
This is water, and we're,
this dollars?
this is,
Gallons?
no, this is in cubic feet.
Cubic
So for 2015 in water, we're projecting about 1.8 million cubic feet. Of that, where do I have that? 339,000 is going to be irrigation. That's based on the 2-year average. For wastewater, it's the same. It just does not include irrigation. So our 2-year average is 1,424,000. Electric 2-year average is 6.6 million kilowatt hours. We did bump 2015 projections for electric by 200,000 kilowatt hour. It's still below even what our 2014 budgeted was.
There was 6.9 million.
And for propane, we're projecting 15,955,000, and that's also in cubic feet for propane. So with that, I'll go ahead and go to our updated budget summaries. Start with G&A, and I'll just kind of do a brief description of how they're formatted. First column is our actual budget for 2014. The second column is our projected year-end actuals. And that is also actuals through February with budgeted numbers for the remainder of the year. Then we have 5-year projections. We went from a 1-year budget to a 5-year budget. So for G&A, we're assuming property taxes revenue is going to be $850,000, and that's going to remain stable over the next 5 years. Expenses are projected to increase by 2% over the next 5 years. And in this, we're assuming that all property tax revenues are going to be allocated, whether it be electric or however we decide to cover our losses. But that's all for the next 5 years. For water, we are projecting our production to increase by 2% annually. The water usage charge is projected to remain stable at $4 per 100 cubic feet, while our base rate charges are budgeted to increase by CPI annually, which in this scenario is we're projecting 1.5%. Again, expenses are being budgeted to increase by 2% annually, except for interest expense and depreciation, which in this scenario is going to remain stable. So with this, our water loss is projected at $158,000 annually, but with a cash loss of $6,000. For our wastewater, production over the next 5 years is also projected to increase by 2% annually. The usage and base rate charges are projected to increase by 4.5% for 2015 and 2016. Last year, with the rate increase, it was approved to increase rates by 3.5% over the next 3 years, and then adding an additional 1.5% for CPI increase. And then after 2016, rates are projected to just increase by CPI. Expenses again are projected to increase by 2%, except for interest expense and depreciation, which makes the 2015 projected net loss at $472,000 with a cash loss of $72,000. We've added a small cable, same thing, it's just going to remain stable with a 2% increase in expense. Solid waste revenues, budgeted rates are just showing a CPI increase with the same 2% anticipated expense increase. And then for propane, production is expected to increase by 2% annually. Rates, however, in 2015, we're budgeting a rate decrease. Current rates are at 9.3 cents per cubic foot, and in 2015 through 2019, we're projecting to decrease those to 7.5 cents to still cover our losses. Same expenses are projected to increase by 2% annually. And with this, our 2015 net income is projected to be $61,000. Not including depreciation, that's going to be $146,000.
Can you remind me, why is it 9.3 cents now?
Why is it?
Yeah, I can't.
Why is it going down?
Because of cost of diesel or cost of propane is going down.
Really?
So this
Trend is
reflects the
expected?
credits that we've been getting. Okay.
That's one reason, but the other reason I think is that Mountain Utilities, the predecessor, used to run propane at a huge profit and to cover electricity losses, basically. Because their rates were, correct me if I get it wrong, regulated by the CPUC according to the 1999 rate case. And so, frankly, the way Mountain Utilities broke even was to, if you will, overcharge the propane customers. And we basically said each of these enterprises ought to stand alone.
Right. I guess I was just surprised that in this day and age to think any kind of energy costs are going to go down seems contrarian to...
Well, propane is related to the cost of natural gas, which has gone from $9 down to $4.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why your electric rates have also dropped in other regions, not ours.
We look forward to
down the wrong road.
I think this is important. I mean, again, we've talked about how do we communicate our rate strategies and the impacts of that and so on. I know there are some of our customers who only use electricity, so they'll be impacted by whatever the electricity is, but many customers have both electricity and propane for different uses in their house. And my own experience, and I assume it's similar for many, is that even though electricity has gone up, propane with the credits we've gotten have gone down, and my overall energy cost annual for the same amount of use has been stable, hasn't changed. So I think that's an important piece of the communication perhaps as we...
Well, I think the other part is when we establish these rates, the goal is to break even.
Yeah.
That's our real charter in our service to customers, but we have to guess, we have fixed costs and we have to divide them into a guess over how many units we'll sell. And one of the things I want to be able to do going forward is to measure the accuracy of our fixed costs on a regular basis to make sure that our rates are based on is what's actually comes in. I mean, one of the variations has been like the cost of electricity that's charged to wastewater or something else. And so the goal here is to continue to refine these so the basis of our rates are verified in the subsequent year's actual costs.
These are still a draft. I just want to go over some of the assumptions. I'm going to sit down with management and make sure right now the 5-year is just, increases 2%. We're still going to narrow it down, see if we can specify any specific expenses or revenues that would increase for the next time, and have a balance sheet with the next one with a combined summary.
But it looks to me like with your losses and with our losses in 3 of our big departments, wastewater, water, and electricity, that we're looking at projected significant losses after depreciation. Is that, I guess, before property tax, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, or are you finished, Jill?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from the board or the audience?
And so the projected losses that Stan's just referred to really is mostly a function of the lower than hoped for demand for our various utilities, right? I mean, low snow year.
Yeah.
We've had 3 years of drought. And instead of continuing to project increases, we wanted to get more to actuals.
Yeah, and
which is
so
coming up with the
while
average.
staff has done a very good job of controlling costs, staffing costs, and so on, there's some fixed costs that we just can't avoid.
And I think it should be noted that when, water and sewer, back in the day that when all we did was water and sewer, they typically lost money, and we would subsidize those. We wouldn't have depreciation funded, and we'd subsidize everything with property taxes. So now we're trying to get to the next level where we're actually funding depreciation and using property tax and other means. So, and as Standards was mentioning, electric always lost money from utilities, and propane was subsidizing the other departments. So we're trying to stand alone per department. And the moves that the board has made with the wastewater increase, the water consumption has made huge differences in what our numbers used to be to what they are today.
So with all the cost, the upward cost pressure on the Out Valley project, does that grab into these figures at all? Is it?
Yes.
For the electric, is certainly.
Yeah, so I mean, we fully reflected the latest view of reality, unpleasant as it is, in these numbers, as well as reduced demand. It sounds like it's.
Okay, so the board's direction is to continue with a fully integrated budget by the next board meeting?
Yes.
Good. Or actually by the next finance committee meeting, right?
Yes.
Where we'll refine it. Is there anything else on budget, Michael? So we'll move to 8 JKL. Review and possible adjustment expansion to other departments of the district's lead credit policy. Manager Sharp and Assistant Manager Campbell.
The district has had a lead credit policy for over 20 years. It developed a lead credit policy. It actually is a wastewater consumption policy is what it really is. And it's calculated based on the last 3 years of average usage for the month of the leak. So if you have a leak in your house, we take the last 3 Marches and see what they were, and you get charged for the average of that at the regular consumption rate. So if your average was 100 cubic feet, you would be charged the rate times 100. The overage of that, what you used over and above that average, would be charged out as the irrigation rate, because that was thought was the cost to produce the water to your house. So that's how the leak, you can only do it once every 5 years. Pretty, and the thought pattern behind it is we don't want to, this is giving away public funds, of course, we don't want to charge a customer for a cost that we did not incur. And we didn't treat the waters, presumably it didn't go through the wastewater, or even if it did, it's clear water. It doesn't have a huge impact on cost. So we didn't want to charge customers for a cost that the district didn't incur, but we would charge them for the cost that it took to produce. So recently, we started charging water consumption rates. And a customer came back that had applied for a leak credit policy after being explained by customer service or our logic and saying, well, yeah, I got it, but you're already charging me a water consumption rate. Aren't you double charging me for the water to get it there? A, by charging me the water consumption rate, I'm paying that, and by charging me the balance of the water that's been used for the leak. Fair point. So the proposed revision to the regulation would eliminate this secondary charge. We would continue to charge them the water consumption rate, the water to get it to, but we wouldn't double charge them that same rate. And you have a regulation 62002 in your packet that reflects that elimination of that double charge. So why not the case for electric and propane? And the case there is that with electric and propane, if there's a leak or if there's excessive usage, they're actually using a commodity. They're using electricity, which the district is paying for. It's no cheaper for the district to produce the propane as leaks through a leak as it is it's actually used. So for customer service and for the manager, it's easy to explain these things if it's based on a rationality. You know, if we just say it's a $50 credit every 5 years, it's very hard to explain where that came from. But if we have a rational way of looking at this, it's much easier for a customer to go, oh, okay, I got that. I can move that sort of a leak credit. So the district is, or the board is looking, staff is looking for any direction on this. If you agree with our basic concept, we would bring this back before the next meeting as a consent agenda item for approval.
Okay, that certainly makes sense to me.
I didn't quite get where the double charge occurred.
So with the wastewater, it's a wastewater consumption charge. So what we're doing is we're taking the average and we're charging him what he would normally be using.
Right.
Because he's out in the unit normally.
Right.
Now the balance of that charge is, let's say that, you know, it's 1,000 unit leaked and 100 unit average. The 900, we charged him the irrigation rate to produce the water to get it to him. That's our existing policy.
Right, right.
But we're already charging him that now through the water consumption charge, which is the same rate.
Oh, so there was a $4 adder on the wastewater for the difference. Okay, I understand that.
So that's the double charging, which the
Okay. And can we say that our real solution is to be able to detect leaks before they get as expensive, right? I mean, that's the trend that we're on.
If we're getting an $11,600 water bill, that would probably be a good objective.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
So we're looking at a revised leak policy that takes away the charge at irrigation water rates for the excess over the prior 3 years usage for that month.
Yes. And that would be revised in the regulation, which would be attached to the next packet as a consent item.
Any comments from the public? Seems to make sense to me. I support that direction. I end up seeing 3 nods. Do I have 4th?
I agree.
Unanimously nodded. So that concludes section 6 of this short agenda, which means we'll move to manager reports. 9A is general manager report.
The district is in the process of receiving our 501c3 application. For 501c3, we have formed a new corporation, the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District, which is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. Articles and bylaws have been filed with the state. It has been submitted to IRS. The way it worked with IRS, you can begin using the 501c3, and we are currently issuing tax deductible receipts for donations, and the IRS has made that retroactive to their final decision, which will come out, I think, in August. So we're actually moving forward with that.
I have a question, if I could.
Please.
Which is there a number that we can circulate, a tax ID number, 501c3
I
tax
think you
ID?
used the actual federal ID number at this point.
Is that on this
It's on the receipt. I
Right.
can get that to you.
But is there a federal tax ID number? Well, can you give it to me? I'd like to just check to see if it gets donor advised funds accepted. And my,
You'll just give it to me. Yeah, we do have it.
Okay, and we should put it on our website.
my real request is whether it's operational now. Is it?
Yeah, we have a letter stating if we get a new one, that our current tax ID, to use that, and it will be retroactive to when we file the application.
Okay. In the interest of time, I won't say anything else. Please proceed.
We have been working with KCP on the Timber Creek Townhomes. It's a new development on the site of the Chair 9 parking. District has submitted 2 letters, one on the layout and one on the utilities. The one on the layout went to Amador County, the one on the utilities went to the developer. The layout, we had differences with the developer on certain aspects of the layout as far as snow storage and the whole concept of having a commercial development served through residential development. We put a letter out to Amador, which has the difference are between comments and findings. Comments are opinions and recommendations to the Amador planning. Our findings are actually our legal findings where we required a wider road. Fire Chief Ansel went down to the meeting on last Tuesday, I believe it was, and they agreed with all of our findings, and that got into the record. We weren't so lucky with all of our recommendations, but at least our legal premise as far as the width of the road and the fire pressures were taken into consideration. Utility letter went out to the developer, different issues with each service, and we'll keep the Timber Creek Townhomes, we'll keep the planning committee informed of our progress with that. We put out a letter on penalty forgiveness for signing up for ACH. What that means is that for any customer that had a penalty, they could get a credit for that if they signed up for ACH up to I think a maximum of $100. We also put out a vendor donation letter, which went out to all of our vendors, people that provide our services, to donate to the fire department for our new chipper. And we have had responses on that. I know GeoCon and others have actually responded, and it's a positive aspect. We have gotten a homeowner donation of $1,000 for the chipper, so that is a huge step forward, and at least 1/20th of the expenses have already been taken care of, so that's good news. We are working with the on a matter of cleaning up 2 areas, employee housing and more importantly fire impact. We are looking into the processes we would need to pursue special legislation. Dick Shanahan has prepared a memo outlining the steps needed, and we're still reviewing and discussing that item. And with that, that's the conclusion of the matter.
Okay. Operations report. That's you, Rick.
So for my report, I'm just going to really hit on 3 subjects. First of all, one that's not in the board's package, that we are moving forward with the AMI remote read water meter project. And I brought an example of a thermocoil box, a water meter, an MXU, and all the devices that we use to program the new remote reads. And I'm grateful to Sarah. I'm happy to announce we've installed 132 of these remote water meters in the following locations: at the Lost Cabins, Thimblewood, the Sentinels West, Cablesview, Meadowstone for the hot water side only, and then Kulab Rock and Cornish Court. And staff will be continuing with this project to complete the activity, hopefully by June 1st. Our deadline technically is July 1, but we want to get it done by June 1st this year. So if the board, after this meeting, would like to take a look at that, I'm more happy to show you kind of how it all works. And if homeowners out in the residential neighborhoods see us messing around with their water meter, that's what we're doing. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is, it's in the board's packet as well. I did receive notice from ISO for our ISO rating. It will remain a 4. They can't publicly give us a letter yet until after the 26th of April, but we should receive a letter reflecting that we succeeded by maintaining the 4. And then they'll publish their findings to all the insurance companies in July. So we'll have to take that off the list. There's minimal amounts of corrections that we need to do with really no financial impact to the district. So that was a good finding. And then finally, on pages 196 and 97 in the board packet is the pre-registration form for our barbecue, which is coming up on July 5th. And then also on the district's website under Services Fire Department, you'll find the actual donation form request letter. So again, appreciate the committee, the communications committee getting that on the website, and we look forward to the event. Our next barbecue wine tasting meeting is on April 22nd here at the district at 3:30. And so if anybody's interested in helping out, they can either call in or stop by and put them to work. But that concludes my report, unless there's any other questions from the board about some of the stuff that Matt Wheeler talked about or anything else.
Questions of either Rick or Michael's operations? Good to go. It's your demo center. Electric and propane systems, it's a brand new.
Hello again. I would like to give the board an update on generator number 7. That is the Volvo that is going to need to be replaced this summer. We've made contact with Dave Morton from Power Secure, who will be doing the replacement, and we're scheduled tentatively for the first week in May. The only other item I would like to discuss is the update on the emissions testing. We are doing our annual emissions testing on our environmental system at the powerhouse. It's scheduled for the 23rd and 24th of this month. We have been doing some repairs and some pre-testing. We've done pre-testing at one of the audit points, and so far the results of the pre-test have been very encouraging. We're coming in less than 7% off, whereas we're allowed up to a 15% variance. So we're looking forward to getting that testing complete and getting generator 7 replaced. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Brandy, once we're in backup mode on the powerhouse, do we still have to do the manual emissions test?
We're going to be discussing that with Great Basin. We don't know it.
We'll have to do a emissions testing, but it might not be annual. So we're going from a RADA testing to a CGA, which is much less. And hopefully we'll be able to go to a 3-year cycle.
And is there a problem with one of the Caterpillars?
We have an oil leak on number 3 that's going to be addressed, and then Holt's going to be taking a look at the other generators.
Okay. Any questions of Brandy?
I realized there's one thing in our packet that there's an insurance claim. Is there for the fire department?
For the 2 risers that got destroyed.
I'm sorry, but I forgot to ask you when you were.
I can speak on that.
Okay.
Back in, I believe it was March, we had a vehicle strike 2 of our fire hydrants within Kirkwood Valley, and we've since filed a claim with AAA Insurance. They've assigned a claim number, and we have up to 3 years to basically make the repairs.
When we have time, I'll tell you the long story. It's pretty funny.
With photos.
There are pictures and stuff.
Cool.
Not cool, actually. So administrative report. Jill.
In the matter of time, I'm going to try and keep this short unless you guys have any specific questions. But I do want to start with the performance reporting on page 208 of the packet. It kind of goes along with the financials. We still haven't been able to get our production numbers onto the actual financials. So this is just supplemental. For February, our electric production, our actual metered was 737,092 kilowatt hours, when our budgeted was 926,153. So our production for February was down 189,000 kilowatt hour. That did improve in March, with our actual metered at 808,721 kilowatt hour, with budgeted at 844,264. So we were only down for March 35,543. For propane, for February, our actual metered in cubic feet was 2,359,913 cubic feet, with our budgeted at 2,633,690 cubic feet. So we were down 273,777. But we actually did hit our production numbers in March. Our actual metered was 2,239,486, which our budgeted was 2,061,902. So we were up 177,000 in March for propane.
How do you get a negative unmetered total? I know it's with great difficulty, but I thought maybe you could some.
That would be.
That would mean a reverse leak, right? That it's
Would
secondary
be a reverse
propane that we
leak.
can't account for.
There's some variables in that as far as the temperatures because of propane. In the tank itself, there's temperature readings, I think, and the time of day that you take the actual
Expansion,
measurement.
right? If it's warm, it expands.
Right, so
There's a few things with propane.
That I don't need to know about.
No,
Okay, thanks.
I can definitely go into them, but when we get fuel delivered, what we actually get delivered isn't what they put in the tank down at a lower elevation.
I see.
There's,
Okay,
I can,
right.
So there's elevation and temperature and time of day things, and when we take the actual measurements actually has an impact on the difference between the two. So if you're metering at a certain rate and then or in our usage, if you're taking that read and you meter over an entire day, if you take the read in the morning, it might be 10% lower than at noon on the same day because of the expansion characteristics.
Okay.
It's kind of like when the lid blows off your ice cream when you get it.
I think of that,
down low.
right, so that.
Let's keep rolling. to keep this under 4
wastewater
hours.
actually for February and March have done quite well. With our total treated for February at just about 1.6 million, and this is in gallons, with our budget at 1.2, so we were up 439,000 gallons. And in March, we metered or treated 1.3 million with our budget at 999,000, so we were up 302,000 gallons for March. With that, I will go into the financials. Balance sheet, as of February, our total operating our operating cash was at 2,447,438. Our total reserve, as mentioned before, is still at 3.2 million. And at the end of February, our Russ Construction Fund was at 6.3 million. We did add our CalPERS unfunded liability into the balance sheet. So under long-term debt less current portion, there's an additional 476,000 for our CalPERS unfunded liability. As far as our income statement, for the combined For February, our operating revenues were down 109,000 from plan. That's basically all electric. Our operating expenses were also down from plan by 127,000. So our net income combined for February was 187,000, which is 16,000 better than plan. Our year-to-date net loss is 93,460, which is down 169,000 from plan. I will just go ahead and mention electric.
So when we're looking at the fund budgeting for this year coming up, we kind of all said, hey, there's several $100,000 losses after everything, depreciation, all that. Yet year to date, we're showing $93,000 of losses. What's the difference? Is the difference property taxes? I mean, I can't
Yes.
imagine where.
Yes, and this, it shows in the combined other, under operating or non-operating revenues, other, there's 472,000. That is the property tax allocations that have gone to electric. For electric, February revenues were down 164,000. Year-to-date revenues for electric are down 450,000 from plan. Operating expenses are also down. Our year-to-date net income for electric is 152,000, but again, that does include the property tax allocation. For February, we did not allocate property taxes to electric. We didn't need them to cover the tier ratio.
Any questions for Jill on financials?
I did want to mention on the operating cash waterfall report, I believe that's page 224, it does show that as of March, our operating cash is at $2,578,000. It shows that it's up 119,000 from plan, but as mentioned previously, the budget assumes that all interest expense from Russ was going to be paid out of operating cash, and anything for the Out Valley was actually capitalized and paid out of the Russ fund, which was about 400,000. So if you take that into account, our operating cash is actually down about 300,000 from plan, as Standish mentioned in the finance committee.
Great.
I noticed in the consent of payables that there wasn't $300,000. Was it that much for Russ interest?
Mm-hmm.
That's a quarter.
It's a it's quarterly.
Quarterly payment.
That is cash out the door. Is that different from what you just said about the capital?
It is cash out the door, but we break it down by if it's our actual costs for Out Valley or the powerhouse. Any interest that's for the powerhouse is being paid out of our operating cash, while the rest of it is being capitalized and taken out of the rest fund.
Basically, anything that's completed is
Right.
expended.
Any questions for Jill?
Also in the packet is a formal engagement letter from Moss Adams. Hopefully our new auditors, if you guys approve. We would like President O'Grady to sign the engagement letter so we can get going with Moss Adams. As soon as we send this to them, we will immediately start working on documents that they need to start getting to know us, and so that we can make sure our audit's done on time. We have scheduled a pre-audit with them. If approved, they will be out the week of June 9th to do our pre-audit, and then the actual audit, they will be here the week of August 20th.
I have one question related to the audit. Is part of the audit also to verify that we're in compliance with our debt, in terms of our debt obligations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they do confirmation letters, and that is part of the charge
Okay.
that they've quoted us.
Okay.
So we went over the audit proposals at the finance committee meeting, not the last one.
Two times fast.
Yeah, we've approved this, we just need
We need
to
a
sign.
signature, so we approved it, right?
Other than that, Rick mentioned the water meter upgrade project. We also did finally receive our indoor units. So that's where we're going to begin our focus on the next few weeks, to wait for a little bit of snow to melt to hit the rest of our residential. And that is all I have.
Won't have to wait long.
No. Go ahead, Tim. Any questions for Jill? Thank you.
Thank you.
So committee reports, communications, anything you want to draw our attention to?
Just one thing, our focus is really on getting people online and to use the online system. So currently, we have 831 accounts that we bill against, and 271 of those accounts use online access. So we're about 30%, which is much better than we were doing with PCS, but a long ways from 100. So we have various plans underway to draw attention to this and encourage signups, particularly focused around the July weekend, when a lot of people might be here, and focusing on the presidents of the various associations.
How many of the 831 are related to the resort?
I don't have that number in front of me, but I think
How
I can
many
tell
of the
you.
31 accounts are related to Vail? Is it 100?
About 60, I believe.
And are they participating in
Not
this?
yet. Yeah. That we're working on that. So.
We've met with Frank Dixon. He needs to take it to a couple other people before
Of course.
we can do that.
Yeah, I imagine the bulk of this is residential, but I can break that out for you.
Planning?
Two things briefly. First, on the Meadow Trails, we had a visit from Jim Hinton, who was interesting because Jim Hinton.
These are residents.
He's got the house that's right out there on the cross-country ski track. You know, he almost like jokingly said you go across his front porch when you go on the cross-country ski track. So he came there to tell us his own opinion about the trail proposal, which was he was fine with having a trail, even though he has it right, in his front yard. But he was only fine with it if it didn't have horses or bicycle usage as part of the rules and regulations. And he implied that this was a strongly held opinion amongst his fellow KMA folks on the side of the valley.
West or east?
East or west?
West side.
Yeah. So we're going to press forward with creating a survey, and then we'll come to the communications committee and try to figure out how to get that out to the community and use the barbecue, of course, as a good engagement point to try to get opinions and traction and consensus.
Is the committee are you promoting trails with horses, or is that just?
It came up simply because the trail consultant that we spoke with said it's always easier to try to get permitting, the extent that you in fact need permitting to do this, kind of unknown at this point how much permitting is involved. But if you go to say, we want to do this, and by the way, we're going to change the ground rules because classes of users that would have been able to use it previously are now going to be excluded, that becomes a much more controversial kind of a thing to get permitted. So my own
Just
opinion.
realize there's an issue with horses, and you spend a great deal of money and effort to keep nitrogen from getting in the creek.
Yeah.
They produce nitrogen.
Yeah.
In big quantities at certain times of the year.
Yeah. Agree. So that's about it on the trail system, I think, for the moment. And the other thing here, we talked about special legislation briefly a few minutes ago. I think the one for the fire department impact fees makes sense. We want to pursue that because we have the vested interest as KMPUD in simplifying and unifying the way that we assess our fire impact fees. And we've got 3 counties. Guess what? We got 3 different ways that it does or doesn't happen. So we want to fix that. On employee housing, we talked about this quite a while. You know, if we wanted to create a housing authority, we would have to get special legislation, and there was very little enthusiasm from the committee members to pursue this, given A, it looks very complicated, B, it's not clear that we have any real vested interest as KMPUD in creating this mechanism, particularly if it takes us time and money to create it. The benefit would be arguably only to the resort, possibly a little bit to KCA, but I think none of the meeting, I would say, you know, we're kind of putting that on the back burner and saying, you know, maybe after we learn about doing it on fire impact fees, we'll understand it better and it'll be something we can fit in, but for now it's kind of less appealing. That's it, sir.
Finance committee?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, the focus is on Russ, the budgeting, and looking at the rates and how we really get them lower.
Say the focus is on PG&E.
It could shift to PG&E by Monday.
Yeah, the latest. Yeah. Peter, operations and capital projects?
I think we covered it pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. So personnel is usually not a very exciting topic, but we had our second committee, personnel committee meeting.
Sorry, guys.
But, well, from my standpoint, we had our second one yesterday. And
Yeah,
actually,
like you said, sorry.
And actually, it was quite interesting for me because, and I'm married to a former human resources person, that's why I say that. And, you know, there are a number of opportunities. Well, first of all, you know, one of the things you do is review general managers, MBOs. Those are going well this year, I think. And then there are a number of opportunities. I mean, Michael said, hey, I'm very excited about this. Looking at the CalPERS health program, and I almost went to sleep. But after hearing it, and Social Security and a number of other things, there's an opportunity for some significant upgrades probably in this area. Meaning things like benefits, we might have an opportunity to both reduce costs and upgrade the benefits for employees. And so I think we'll be looking at that over the next roughly year. I think that staff needs more projects right now with this out valley like a hole in the head. But there's an opportunity for real improvement here, I think. It gets me excited. Is that fair, Eric?
Very good.
Well, guess you didn't like my personnel, or Eric did. So, general discussion. This is the opportunity for board members to ask questions, clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct district staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda. Wondering if you have any. Fire drill?
Yeah, I have two items actually. One is Rick and Dave Waddle, right after the meeting, are going to have a demonstration of our new plasma cutter. And I know it's been a long meeting, but this is going to be outside. It's the device that we cut the holes in these lids to put in the water meter. And so the board authorized the purchase of a plasma cutter so that we could actually cut the holes more effectively than trying to do it with a hammer and a nail. So there'll be a demonstration after this meeting, which Dave Waddle, our field operations manager. We're also going to be doing a fire drill coming up very shortly. Director Rickard has very nicely offered his residence as the location for this fire drill.
This
So
is
we
to be
took
followed by a mosquito abatement drill at Standish's residence.
So we took some before and after. Here's a picture of the site location, and we plan on putting ladders up and doing some rescues. And here's the site of during the operation itself. We just didn't want to have Eric have any worries about the operation and the fire drill itself. So
Can I call my insurance company? When do I call my insurance company?
So
Beforehand, they'll infer that it's ours.
So we're going to actually have victims, and we'd like the board members, if any of you are up during the period, to volunteer. We'll have some fake blood, and we'll be transporting you to the nearest hospital we can find. So.
Yeah, in Elko, Nevada. When is that fire drill?
Mid-May?
Yeah, to be determined.
Not going to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I guess we should adjourn the meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you for 4 hours.
Thank you.